Prospect House Media.
And now, prepare yourself for the only weekly podcast you won't want to miss. Welcome to the Ameritocracy Show with Troy Edgar, live from our studios in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C.
Everybody, I am Troy Edgar and welcome to the Ameritocracy Show. Thank you for tuning in and checking it out. It is greatly appreciated. This podcast examines the conditions for personal and economic growth and opportunity across America. This week, I met with Dante Valve Company President and CEO Lisa Dante Papini at her company's headquarters in Long Beach, California. Lisa and I were MBA classmates in 1998 at the University of Southern California's Marshall School of Business. She became the president and CEO in 2016, taking over the business that was started by her family in 1960. The company is a full-service manufacturer, distributor, and repair facility of valves and related products for the industrial and military markets. In this episode, Lisa talks about her company's important position in the U.S. shipbuilding industrial base and her role as the chair of the Aircraft Carrier Industrial Base Coalition, a group that is focused to preserve the strength of the Navy's aircraft carrier force and promote the value of their industrial base. She reminds us that today's U.S. Navy aircraft carriers are a stunning result of over 2,000 companies in 44 states performing $9.4 billion worth of work. Lisa's story is very inspirational. She provides an incredible testimony of resilience and kindness. In 2015, months before taking over the company, her husband passed away. She talks about raising her 3 children and the gracious help she received from her friends, family, co-workers, and the community. Lastly, we talked about joining a CEO peer network and the benefits of getting an executive coach. This episode is another example of the greatness of America and why we all need to contribute and give back. This also highlights the importance for the U.S. to maintain a very strong industrial base in order to protect our national security. I hope you enjoy. Good afternoon, Lisa. How you doing?
I'm fine, Troy. How are you?
Very good, very good. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for inviting me to be on the show.
Yeah. So Lisa, you and I have had over 25 years of a relationship starting at USC, and we've really had a great opportunity, and it's a pleasure for me to come back in here and to see where you're at and your company's at. It's just really incredible what you've been able to do.
It's a pleasure to watch your career too. I watch you through Facebook and all the rest and through LinkedIn, and you've done some great things and you continue to do great things. And I'm so happy to see you. It's really great to have this time to reconnect.
Yeah. What I wanted to do, so today for the show, we are at the Dante Valve headquarters here in Long Beach, California. And a couple things that I was hoping that we'd be able to talk a little bit about is that, within IBM Consulting, I run their supply chain business for the federal market. And previously, a chief financial officer at DHS. So at the DHS job, we had the Coast Guard. And the Coast Guard really struggled with the defense industrial base and shipyard capacity and trying to build things. And being the finance guy, like trying to make sure the acquisitions were set up and the purchase orders get out the door. When it came to being at IBM, I think what's been helpful, and I've said this in other interviews that I've done with folks in the federal market, is like I understand the acquisition and the appropriations process, so it helps me set expectations in my company when I'm in the portion of the business that I run. What I think is interesting with your company is that you're in the defense industrial base. You have a very critical mission for the Navy and probably other pieces of the government contracting, but definitely the Navy. And so what I was hoping to be able to do through the interview is to hear about your company, but also to maybe educate our listeners a little bit about what it means to do business in the government, what it means to do business in the defense industrial base, especially around shipbuilding and the complexities that a CEO like yourself would have to deal with in trying to manage. And really it comes down to employ people too, and try to make sure that you have the base of capability. And then probably lastly, what I was hoping to get into with your your position in the industry is I've noticed in the last couple of years that you've been getting very involved in the defense industrial base, some of the coalition groups in the industry. And I want to probe into that a little bit to kind of get a perspective of where you have picked and what the significance of that is and what that coalition is actually trying to achieve for somebody that's not in shipbuilding. But what I thought would be helpful is to maybe start off and have you just give a little bit of a history of yourself and, and the story leading up to where we're at today.
Okay, sure. That sounds like a great conversation and where we're headed. And sure. So I'm a Southern California native and grew up in Hacienda Heights, California. Went to Cal State Long Beach, just right over here for my undergraduate degree, and got a degree in journalism with an emphasis in public relations and a minor in sociology. At the time that I graduated, right after I graduated from school, I left one job. I was laid off from one job and kind of intentionally, and then started the very next day after I was laid off, I came to Dante Valve to come and just go have lunch with my family. And so I was going to lunch with my dad, my grandpa, and my uncle. We were 10 miles away from each other. And I thought, I don't have any job. I'm free. All right, let's go for it.
And Lisa, to claim ground. So you're Lisa Papini, but you're Lisa Dante Papini. So at this point, you definitely, your family, you're talking about your business, your family's business.
I'm talking about my family's business. Yes, I'm talking about they were working at Dante Valve. I was not.
Got it.
And came to have lunch and they said, hey, while you're looking for your next real job, we have all these orders and we're really having a hard time getting them out and producing the product. So can you maybe just come help us out a little bit temporarily while you're unemployed? And I said, sure. And that was over 30 years ago. Wow. And I started as a clerk in the warehouse. I would take our orders that we'd received either from the Department of Defense or from shipyard customers or, like Newport News that builds aircraft carriers or Bath Iron Works or Ingalls Shipbuilding or any of the shipyards at that time. And I would take that. I would take the order. I'd go out in the warehouse. I'd pull all the parts. I'd get on the forklift. I'd take that order back to the shop. They'd build it. And then I'd come back and pick it up and take it to shipping. So it was a lot of fun. Actually, it was a very different job than what I had prior to that. I was a concert producer. So it was a definite shift from one industry to the other. But I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed working with my family. I enjoyed spending time with my grandpa and my dad and my uncle. And I stayed for a while. And truth be told, I didn't really even look for another job. I didn't apply for anything else. And I just stayed. As time went on, I realized, I might be actually staying long term. And if that is the case, then maybe I need to think about what I'm actually qualified to do, where this might lead, and I might need to put some thought into that. So those thoughts and the feeling that I might end up running this business someday led me to seek out an MBA. And to become more educated in business because I had zero education in business and I felt absolutely unqualified for any job that related strictly to business that I might obtain someday at Dante Valve. And then we met.
That's interesting because I remember, and that is where we intercept. As we came back together. We came together at that point at USC in the MBA program, and we were in with a bunch of different types of people. And the one thing again for the listeners, a big part of the discussions we have is on credentialing and being able to kind of take advantage of that educational opportunity. And with the MBA. I know I got a tremendous amount out of it because everybody was coming at it from a different angle. Everybody had something different to offer. we made some pretty good lifelong friends in that process too, that we end up still talking with today. Through the MBA portion of your career and, your expectations of what you hope to be able to get out of that when we were at USC, what did you think was the most valuable part that you were able? I remember the after we graduated, everybody's like, some people left and went to a different career. Some people stayed in their job and retired in that same position. So, a lot of times I know you and I've had discussions like, what was the objection or the objectives of what we were trying to accomplish? And I'm just curious on your side.
So for me, it was twofold. Number one was to gain some knowledge, to make myself qualified and to what I felt would be qualified, and to learn techniques, analysis tools, how to model cash flows. I need to study accounting, all those types of things, and to just get myself to a point where I am appropriately in the room. That was one part of it. And that was very valuable to me because I did obtain that. And I had a minor or an emphasis in entrepreneurship and learned a lot about the entrepreneurial journey, how to go, how to scale, how to analyze opportunities and do business plans, and all that was invaluable. The other reason why I was there was really because I knew that if I committed to Dante Valve, being that this was my family's business, and if I got into it, I was getting into it for a very long time. And I had not had I had not had a lot of exposure to other industries at that point, only the concert producing job. And I wanted to make sure that if I went, that there wasn't something else that I absolutely loved doing, and that I really didn't wake up one day with a huge amount of regret that I'd done this and, I missed my opportunity as an investment banker or as a whatever it was. So I thought getting the education is a nice way to talk to people, learn from them, learn their stories, see if I like what they're doing, if I want to do it more than what I'm doing, and also the different subjects that we were studying. And we got quite a few of them, and we had quite a different, so many experiences there. And what I ended up coming out of there knowing was that I wanted to stay here at Dante Valve.
Yeah, it had to be pretty powerful. You get out, you kind of engage, and it's not something where you like get done at the end and you're a different person. I felt myself changing, and I, like you, had a full-time job and a family, trying to do everything at the same time. And I just felt myself getting better in what I was doing at that time. But, as we kind of finished through, I remember the kind of the parting shots. You and I had been a part of a team that went to Europe. We laughed about this just recently. I was in Sweden probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and that was exactly where our projects were over there. So we had experience. But I remember coming back, and that was near the end of the MBA. And you kind of, I was looking, and I knew your family had a business, and I was wondering, would you stay? Because there were so many opportunities when you got done, especially at a great university like USC. It was almost like being in a candy store. Like, it was like, okay, what do you want to do? And, so when you ended up coming into, how did you feel like things changed? Because from the MBA to you becoming the CEO of Dante Valve, can you talk a little bit about that process? Because there's the dynamic of, you're not in this corporate structure that just kind of promotes people and you're slated. I mean, you're in a family structure where there's a perception of who you are and what you might be. And then there's who you actually are now professionally, and your family may have a different perspective of who you are, or maybe they have a better perspective after the MBA. So I was just kind of curious, how did you get to the point of the CEO?
I got to this job just one step at a time. It was go from the warehouse clerk to then processing orders, selling orders, interfacing with shipyards, working with engineers. It was just step by step by step by step over. And I'm glad it worked that way, because I don't feel that I came out of school a more qualified person without question, but I did not come out with the actual work experience that needs to happen and you need to have in order to lead an organization. So that was, another decade away. I have just steadily plugged away at it. My family has always had faith in me. They've invested in me. They've listened. I've listened to them. I'm very family focused, and so are they. And we've really had a very tight bond, and we've been very close knit, and we've just developed together. I think that over time, my father sort of stepped back because he was a leader and was out in a more public role. My uncle, Mike, he was always more of in the shop and sort of an inside role and knows details of valves in and out and is more of a product person. But as my father sort of stepped away as he got older, then I stepped up. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it again, just like any great business, people have their specific roles, and you kind of start going through and building on that. As you were going through, you end up, we got out of MBA school about 98, and I think you had taken over a CEO job around 2016 here. And do you remember that first point when you were actually now the face of the company, or was that a big event, or did that just like, oh, they're finally calling me that now, just out of curiosity?
It was a bit of a blur. It was a bit of they're finally calling me that now. But what really hit home for me was the responsibility, because there is a great responsibility. At least I felt it. I know I still had my team, but when I have the title of CEO, now I felt, okay, now it's a much heavier weight to carry. And it was coming at a time of my life where it was a rather difficult one in general. And but yes, when I took over as CEO, I immediately felt the weight of it, and I needed to level up skills even more. And that's sort of how I respond to a new challenge is, am I qualified to do it? Do I have the skills? How could I be better? And what might I need to know? The other thing that I do that the late Donald Rumsfeld, Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, had his whole thing of known knowns, known unknowns, the unknown unknowns. Yeah. And I ponder those a lot. So if I can figure out what the known unknowns are, then I try to go and make those known, actually, and to get the skills and to make those, to eliminate those as risks. And then the known unknowns are the unknown unknowns are the things that keep me up at night and that cause me some worry, which definitely increases when you're in the CEO role.
So as you're a little bit with the family business, and then I want to kind of start talking a little bit about the defense industrial base, but I just wanted to set this up as, I've had, I've started a lot of different companies, and one of them I had started with my brother. It was a construction company, and we had sold that. But it was, I think the hardest part about being in the family business is there's what happens at the office, and then there's kind of, how you don't want to get into a situation where you damage the family relationship. And I remember getting into business with my brother, and my mom would pull my brother and I aside and like, you guys, it's not like we asked her for permission, but she's like, you guys can do this, but you got to promise me that you'll never let this business stuff get in between the family. And, this is a big business that you've got here. And so, it's also a big audience to watch dynamics and being able to go through. And, I always told my brother, it's like, we may have tough discussions, but at the end of the day, I want to make sure that we can sit out on the back porch and eat long after this stuff is over and be able to kind of enjoy each other. And, when you're running this type of a business, do you spend time? Is that something your family worries about? I'm sure they worry about it, but I mean, do you consciously address that, or is that just, it's a natural because it's been a family business?
You need to consciously address that. We are very aware of the fact that our bond is deeper with each other now. So we have the bond of a tight-knit family. And so I have an uncle and I have a cousin. And I love them because I love them in a family way. And then when we come in here, we transform into business, and we have to make value decisions, and we have to do things that get to the core of us, how much we each get paid, what our title is, all those sorts of things that sort of define people's value. Yeah. And so you have to do that in a professional sense. And then you have to not carry that home. And you also have to be really careful about family communication, because the three of us could go to family events and talk about work. But in doing so, we would be excluding all the rest of our family members, and we wouldn't be able to connect with them. And that's not the right thing to do. So we have to keep that separate. Conversely, coming into work, we also can't bring our family bond into work, because if we fall into family, we have a really long shared history, right? I mean, I've known my cousin since he was born. My uncle's known me since I was born. We can't start talking about things that I did when I was 3, or that when I used to babysit my cousin, which is a thing. It's true. And we can't bring up our family bond, because then we're excluding all the people that work here that can't relate to that. So you have to shift a little bit. You have to have that presence and awareness. You have to be open to the people that you're with at the time, and make sure you're being inclusive and that you're not excluding anyone by what you're focusing on or what you're choosing to talk about.
So as your business got to a certain point, I've been noticing over the last couple of years, you've been taking a very targeted approach as the CEO of your company to get really active in your industry and to establish your eminence, not only for your company, but also on important issues in the defense industrial base. For the listeners, if you wouldn't mind, just giving a little bit of an idea of what is the defense industrial base and what does the importance of the defense industrial base in shipbuilding?
Sure. The defense industrial base is a group of individual companies. We're not really a group, but it's a term that is applied to companies in the United States, primarily, that are supplying products and services to support the armed services of the United States and the Coast Guard. And these companies can be large, companies that you've heard of, Boeing, Raytheon, all those types of people, but they're also companies that are mom and pop manufacturing, or, smaller businesses throughout the country that no one has ever heard of. And so for shipbuilding and specifically for aircraft carriers, which I'm involved in quite a bit, there are about 2,000 companies across 46 states that supply parts and services for the aircraft carrier program. And that is to maintain, construct, and support carriers.
Can I ask you a question? So in the Coast Guard, I was in part of what they call the offshore patrol cutter, and kind of came in. They were really having a lot of challenges with that program. They awarded it to a company called Eastern Shipbuilding. And what I learned about the industry of shipbuilding, and you're specifically in the Navy on carriers, is a limited capacity in the United States, and very very hard, because it is Buy American. That's the process that we do with our federal dollars. And so it's really important to maintain our federal base and our industrial base, whether it's in shipbuilding or anywhere. But I just noticed, we and the Coast Guard, and this is public, we had to take some preventative steps to ensure that the business that we picked to build this ship was able to finish building the ship. It's borderline of calling it subsidize. I'll just call it maybe protecting the industry, but by doing that, it's really protecting national security. It's trying to make sure that we have a capability, that we're putting taxpayer money into the hands of a company, but that company, we need them to succeed, because if they succeed and can matriculate to a bigger business, then we have more capacity. In your industry, and I know that, as a part of the Aircraft Carrier Industrial Base Coalition, what is the issues that are the big issue or the most important issue that you guys would deal with, or maybe something that you're passionate about and why you joined?
So we did supply that OPC contract. We supplied that through our distributor partner, W&O Supply. They supply all sorts of products, and ours is one of them. And that product, we did a bunch of those orders as well. So, the defense industrial base has decreased in size dramatically. There was a report that came out in 2018 that said that since the year 2000, approximately 20,500 companies have left the defense industrial base. So what that means is there are fewer companies building the products that our armed forces need, that support people. And where it becomes part of national security is, do we have the capabilities that we need? Can we meet the challenges that we see in the world? And do we have the people that we need? Also, if you really think about and take it the next level, we have people forward deployed that are in harm's way. And can we support them? Can we provide them with the protection that they need and the goods and the material that they need to go out and do their jobs? That's critical. And so when you talk about, people talk about the defense industrial base, I really do want them to think of it as national security and protection of our people who are out forward deployed. As far as the shipbuilding industrial base, that shipbuilding industrial base has decreased as well as part of the larger drawdown, and is in a state that, when I look at it, I think of two things. I think that it is fragile, and it is also resilient. So, in terms of fragility, it's due to the size, the reduced capacity, the reduced size, the challenges that have come up in recent years. You know, nobody wants to hear about COVID anymore and using it as an excuse. And I don't use COVID as an excuse, but we do have to look at the shift that happened in our society due to COVID, and people that left work and said, that's it, I'm going to go out and I'm not going to work anymore. And the knowledge that walked out the door when that happened, and how long it takes to train up new people in a new generation. That's a critical factor. That's not something that is insurmountable. There's a lot of work going on right now to address that issue and to bring new people into shipbuilding, but it has been a shift that will have an impact, and it will continue because now we'll have baby boomers retire and people, you know, there's going to be a generational shift in this country. So that is the fragility and the risk. There's a risk associated with that. There's also raw material is hard to obtain at this point, and supply chains are just, you probably know, supply chains are just not where they were pre-pandemic, and think material is longer lead time. If we just move off the fragility aspect and we go into the resiliency, the people that I know in this industrial base, especially aircraft carrier industrial base, they're quite resilient. They're full of people who, the companies are full of people who want to grow their business, who want to add capacity, who enjoy scaling, and who want to meet demand. This is where, you know, we can transition into how important it is to have a 2-ship buy for a carrier, or to have a multi-ship buy on a contract for Navy ships, because that adds a stability to the order process, the manufacturing process, the delivery, that helps the supply chain tremendously.
Yeah, you know, with the supply chain, a couple of things that you're saying kind of resonate with me. The thing that I realized, you know, I'm an ex-submariner, so I started way back in the day, but you know, when it came to the Coast Guard, I think what helped me understand that, and then, you know, I was at Boeing, you know, for almost 10 years and leading supply chain in their finance area, is a lot of things come down to long lead. Like the part as being the CFO for DHS, there was kind of 2 projects going on simultaneously. There's I want to build a ship process, and there's, hey, I'm going to build a ship. And we're going to talk about it for a while, but no matter what, we got to get to the 15 most important parts that need to get ordered fairly quickly, to hope that no matter who we pick, that these parts are kind of in the process. So from a supply chain perspective, long lead, I would think when you talk about carriers doing at least 2, or, you know, whatever, it sounds like that's probably the topic that you're focused on. Is that a big deal then for the coalition, is to kind of lobby the acquisitioning of ships then? Is that
the role of the coalition is to make sure that we convey how helpful these contracts are, and that when you buy 2 aircraft carriers at a time, what that means for a small business. So, or any business actually, but it allows stable production. It gives you, what you're saying, the long lead material. So if I get an order and it's for 2 aircraft carriers, most companies will go out and they'll buy the material for those carriers for that order at one time. They'll then start working on that material as it's needed, and they can use it to level load their production. So if they have any sort of a demand dip in their production lines, or they have any sort of a low spot at all, they can fill that in with some of that carrier work. And so it helps to hire people. It helps to retain qualified people. And we're talking about, and you probably ran up this against this at DHS. You're talking about highly skilled people, welders, pipe fitters, that need training, they need qualifications. And so to lose them, they are not easily replaced. And they have to go through that whole process. And so having that to ship by, that work that is stable, it also helps save on cost. The last to ship by for aircraft carriers happened just before inflation spiked. And so many companies bought the material right before it went up in cost dramatically. So that was definitely a good move on their part.
Again, one of the other organizations that you got involved with was the GenEdge. And would you mind talking and just to let the listeners know what that organization does?
Sure. GenEdge is an organization in the Commonwealth of Virginia that is part of the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, and they help manufacturers in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So they have programs targeted to emerging businesses, which is anybody under 20, any company under 20 employees, small businesses, larger businesses. They consult, they help people find strategic opportunities, they help them scale, and they provide all of this at a very cost competitive space and at a target price point. But they really focus on helping manufacturers have stable businesses, grow their businesses, and increase manufacturing in the Commonwealth of Virginia. They've got a great new website that if anybody is listening and that is interested in what GenEdge does, it's GenEdge.org, GenEdge.org. And they're very helpful.
Yeah. And I guess it goes without stating too, is, we are in Long Beach, but you definitely have a facility in Virginia Beach too. Yeah.
Yes. We have a facility in Norfolk. I've recently in 2020 moved to Virginia, which is why I'm working with GenEdge so much. And
that I remember on a personal basis seeing you move. I was like, whoa, the whole family kind of just picked up and went out there. When you looked at the industry, and I guess just to kind of put kind of an exclamation point on your role as the CEO, and as the next 3 to 5 years where Dante Valves is kind of focused, and it seems like you're taking more of an external perspective or relationship with the industry. Anything that you see from like a risk management. You talked about risk management, something that I'm seeing in the supply chain side of the base, especially I'm doing work around the Army industrial base and shipyards for Navy, but there's a lot of focus on what they call the nth level of suppliers. So, you make valves that go into another subsystem, maybe another company does that, and then you have raw materials that are needed to make the valves, and then it kind of goes down and down. And like you said, when the industry shrunk, through just the process that happened over the last 10 to 15 years, what they're finding is the mapping of the supply chain. A lot of this comes down to just a few companies, like at the very low levels, that really control the entire supply chain. And so one of the questions I had for you, just for Dante Valves 3 to 5 years out, is, what are some of the proactive things that you can do to try to ensure that you can surge and flow? It's the resourcing that you're talking about, not only just in people, but in the materials.
Material acquisition is a strategic priority. Having the proper inventory levels and knowing at what level we want to be able to service the customers and be have some really strong analysis behind that. That's critical for us. The other part of it is to think of all of our suppliers as not just suppliers, but partners, share information with them and look at our entire supply chain and really develop strong relationships with all of it, with all of those companies. That's not difficult for us to do, but it is something that we will continue to do and to further develop. And then the other part of it is to always be aware of teaming opportunities and vertical integration. I think vertical integration is critical for us, being able to control our own destiny a little bit more, invest in ourselves, and have more capabilities in-house to produce our own product.
So, your company absolutely has a lot of relationships that are really important that kind of in your, I'll call it the ecosystem of companies that you either support or the ones that support you. I was just kind of interested, without getting into the whole extensive supply chain base, but can you talk a little bit about like companies, maybe the specific companies or general companies that kind of help make Dante successful?
Without question, it's the Department of Defense. We are a prime contractor to the Department of Defense. We also work directly with shipyards, Newport News Shipbuilding, Bath Iron Works, Electric Boat, Ingalls Shipbuilding. And then we have distributor partners as well. So that would be W&O Supply, they're a marine distributor, and Australian Pump down in Australia, and then Tryman Industries as well in the United States. Some of our key vendors, and we distribute their products, are Track Regulator. They manufacture a regulating and reducing valve, that a series of product line of those that we distribute, and also Kunkel Industries, and we distribute their commercial valves.
Yeah, so definitely a pretty significant amount of coordination and really reliance. At the beginning of the interview, you talked about making sure that your prime customer, the Department of Defense, right, that it all comes down to the PO, right? It's like at the end of the day, you had a quote, if you could remind me, it was about, there's talk and then there's the purchase order.
Right. Businesses operate on purchase orders. That is the signal to move. So that's a key thing for us and for most businesses in our industrial base. The Navy has a demand, talks about what they need, and that is all welcome conversation, and we're happy to hear all of that. But for a business in the defense industrial base, specifically the shipbuilding industrial base, there are layers that has to go through in order to get to the point where it becomes actionable demand. So for us, we welcome the conversation. The funding needs to happen in Congress and through the appropriations process. Then it's going to go to the shipbuilder. And then we're going to compete for business, and we're going to get a portion of that work. So once I know what my portion of that work is, then we act and we move. And so this is why these contracts, these multi-ship contracts, again, are so important, because they are the true demand signal for a business.
Yeah, when I was in presenting to NATO, it was interesting. Is like my issue that I was asked to address was the supply chain, but there was also CEOs of all the major industrial base. And, if you think about NATO, 31 countries, it's 31 DoD type organizations trying to figure out. And for NATO, their push is, obviously through the U.S.'s intervention, is they need these other countries to spend money. And so, get their GDP spend or the spend on national defense to be commensurate with a certain percentage of their GDP. And it was interesting is that the CEOs had a session, like I did the supply chain side. They got on stage and they're like, NATO, you're talking. You're not, and you're asking us to make investments, meaning we need to go buy stuff and hire people. And we are, but we need purchase recs because, we're actually out on risk. And we've been talking about this. So a big part of the NATO summit, and then it came back to supply chain, is like, well, as an industry, why don't we make a declaration of what the industry needs to be successful, not just what NATO needs to be successful? Like, the perspective of NATO would be like, I want to make sure that, if it's a lot, there's a perception, maybe not as bad here in the US, but there's a perception in NATO with a lot of the different countries that industry's view is profit, right? And it's that, so we want you to order stuff so we're more profitable. And, and I think, industry wanted to declare, look, we care about national security just like you do. It's not about profit. So let's clear that up. And so, it looks like with your vendor base and being able to kind of go through and, the key demand signal is the purchase rack, and seems really critical in your type of business.
And this is exactly what the Aircraft Carrier Industrial Base Coalition does, is explain the importance of having that purchase order and having the consistency and why it's important. Profit is, every business needs to make a profit, but also having those orders helps retain the qualified people that are specialists. And it provides a stability that allows us to produce at a most efficient rate. So that is what we have to do, and we have to go forward with when we go and talk to senators and our representatives in Washington, D.C., is let that be known. And also the importance of the timeliness of the funding, and the fact that if there are gaps and continuing resolutions and all the rest, what the effect is back in Michigan, or what the effect is on the day-to-day employment, and how that might cause people to be laid off when there's a delay and when there's a funding dip. So all of that stability and all of that national security apparatus that really is needed to support the end goals, it's critical to make that connection between the funding, the purchase order, and the stability and the ability to get the work done.
Just kind of taking a little bit of a turn, a little bit away from the industry, kind of on the personal basis. As the CEO, we talked about you taking over the company in 2016. You definitely, had a lot of stuff going on, and I think maybe it's my personal relationship with you, of knowing and seeing kind of what's going on. And I know in the middle of all this, your husband passed away, and you also have 3 kids. Together, you guys had 3, and so here you are taking over CEO of a company that's going through a lot of stuff. You're able to, it must have been tremendously hard. And then, as a mother of 3 children, trying to just kind of keep it all together. Could you talk a little bit about that and the convergence of that, now that we've set this foundation and all the important work Dante Valves is doing? But how does its leader stay focused through something so hard?
It's you're right. Yeah, it did. I did become the CEO not long after he passed away. So the backstory, I'll tell the backstory, not because I want to start receiving a bunch of messages of sympathy or anything, but just because at this point now it's a defining moment in my life, and it was incredibly difficult. That is absolutely true. But my husband passed away in November of 2015, and I became CEO of Dante Valve in early to mid 2016. I might say that it's a little bit of a blur in there because of that. Yeah. But yes. So, and then prior to that, prior to his passing, he was ill, terminally ill for 4 years. Oh. And so there was a lot of, although I might have been functioning in a kind of a CEO role, I couldn't officially take the CEO role because I knew that I had something bigger happening, and I knew that I couldn't devote my time and energy and resources to it because my husband was in the last stages of his life. And I needed to be able to walk my children through that. I knew it was going to be incredibly difficult. And I knew it was also emotionally, I'm a very emotional person in a way, and I don't shy away from feeling deep emotions. And I knew it was just going to level me, and it did. So how I got through it after it happened was, quite honestly, I've always been a very capable person, and I can handle a lot of things. Being CEO, mom, and dad, having complete financial responsibility for my family, needing to send 3 children to college, not ever knowing that I would never have another person that was going to come in and help me with that. I mean, you couldn't count on that. So I didn't count on that. And I just knew it was all my responsibility, and I was going to have to meet that responsibility on my own. And I tried to do it on my own for a while, and that didn't work, and it wasn't possible. And it was more than I could do. And I realized very quickly that I was surrounded by lovely people with just beautiful souls and lovely, kind people, family and friends, and they wanted to help, and I needed to accept help, which was a position that I was not normally used to, because it's not that I'm very completely hard-headed and obstinate. it's just, I'd like to take care of my own self and my own business, but I was overwhelmed and overmatched. So my mother helped raise my children. Anytime I needed to go on a trip back east and I was here in California, my mom was flying down from Montana to come and stay with my kids. It was that level of a thing. And I had lovely, just really beautiful people at school where my son and my daughter went to school. And my older daughter quickly went to college, but the other people at school were so helpful and so kind. And there were dads who stepped up and mentored my son and took him. My son Nico and his dad liked to hunt. They liked to fish. They liked to do that stuff. And when my husband Dennis passed away, other dads from school stepped up and said, we'll take Nico and we'll go and we'll take him and we'll go get him a hunting license, or we'll help him through that whole process. And so there were just all these beautiful stories of these people doing wonderful things and just being so kind. And it was so heartwarming. And I took it all in and was so grateful. And it was just this beautiful moment of gratitude. And that is how I got through it, was through other people and through their help. Now, of course, there's a role in it of me probably setting a leadership example for my family and setting the standard of what I thought we were all about and what our values were and what we were and weren't going to accept. And we bonded. My kids and I are quite close because we do have that trauma bond, but also we circled the wagons when Dennis was gone, and we just were very, very tight knit and still are. So professionally, the way that I got through it was I immediately sort of got a peer coach, joined a peer group. It's called Vistage, and I that's a group of other CEOs, and so I was part of Vistage, and I had a coach who helped me rise to the occasion professionally, while also meeting my needs personally in terms of how do I meet my needs to my family, and we could talk through all that.
How did you connect or find Vistage? I've had a executive coach on our show here, Ann Collier, and I've used executive coaches. I think anybody that feels like they can do it on their own is crazy. But it's hard to find that connection because there's a million people out there that say they're executive coaches. But to me, it was the word of somebody that was actually one of my clients. He was a controller of a big company and Fortune 500, and he's like, I knew he used her as his coach, and in my day and your day too, it wasn't something you talked a lot about having a coach, because that was like a little bit like, was that a sign of weakness or, because everybody was really a lot of bravado there. But for you, because I've definitely heard of Vistage, great place. But how did you kind of uncover and hook into them?
So at the time that I was introduced to Vistage, I was not looking for it. I was not interested. I had all of this other stuff on my plate, and I was not looking for anything. I was just looking to get by day to day. It was my cousin Matt who brought up the idea of Vistage, and who said, I think, he called Vistage, and he had one of their coaches and come to see us and talk to us. And the person who came in, and I said at that point, okay, I'll talk to him. That was all I was willing to commit. At the time, so then at that time, Les Whitney walked in the door, and Les Whitney was a master chair. He was, he led Vistage groups. He had all kinds of experience, and he sat down and we had a very frank conversation. I ended up joining his group. I was the only female in his group, the only woman. All the rest of them were CEOs. They're all guys. It was kind of a male-oriented environment, but they were all really good people, and willing to help, and willing to, you help each other, right? So Les Whitney changed my life. He now has terminal cancer in an odd twist of fate. He pulled me out of the depths of where I was, and in doing so was actually preparing unknowingly for his own diagnosis and how he could end up helping his wife, because he had watched me. So And now I help him.
Wow. They're
Yeah.
paying it forward there.
Try to.
Yeah. Lisa, as we kind of get to closing here, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about just, it seems like within your story, maybe you could share with the listeners, when we take a look at like resilience and kindness and gratitude, when you talk about your husband, you talk about the people that have surrounded you, what would you leave the listeners with from a perspective and sensitivities and stuff of kind of going through that? Because we all go through it. We always think we're rock hard and rock solid, right? But then it hits. And at any point, too, we're so busy in our stuff that it happens to people around us and we're not always so sensitive to it. It sounds like there's something that you really got out of that experience.
Yes, I am forever changed by that experience. I now know for a fact that I now operate at a deeper level. And when people around me have a need, or we have an employee that's in the hospital right now, for example. And so I can respond in a way that is deeper and caring and kind, and we can try to help his family and do all the rest of that stuff, much more so than just, hey, good, get well. We're not just sending a card, we're responding. I have a gratitude for life every day. I wake up in a good mood every day, because I know how quickly life can change. And I know how you can go from being a 46-year-old, completely healthy, 46-year-old fit guy, to having a diagnosis, a terminal diagnosis the next day.
Wow.
It happens like this.
Yeah.
And you never know when that day is coming. So when you aren't in those moments and a person is not in those moments and you basically have health and things around you are stable and fine, that's a gift. And I think it's a mistake when people don't recognize that as a gift. I do, definitely. I also think when I come in contact with good human beings, I recognize them as gifts. And I try to reciprocate as much as I possibly can. And I try to be as kind as I can. I try to be, as a leader in a business sense, you need to have a presence that makes people comfortable, that makes them want to talk to you, that makes them, so many people share so many things with me. You need to listen to people. You need to treat them with respect. All of those things. And I think a lot of that was just heightened by that whole experience that I went through, because I looked fine on the outside and I was absolutely not fine on the inside. And I went through life with a brave face. And so when I encounter people now, it takes me about, a couple of minutes before I start trying to figure out, are you okay? Or are you coming up with the world with a brave face?
Right.
So.
Yeah, no, I think it's that it's emotional EQ, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just trying to kind of dial into.
Right.
I want to thank you. I think that your description, going back to Dante Valve, back to your industrial base. What I will do is we'll put the information about the Aircraft Carrier Industrial Coalition up on our page, so people that are interested, it's somebody that really appreciates the armed services. I want to thank you for your service to what you do for the industry and what you're doing to kind of make our country safer. So we really appreciate that. And, and I think, again, just as an observation, what you talked about, kindness and the gratitude and being able to wake up every day, I think that's such a strong message for the listeners. And, a lot of people that listen to the show, a lot of the feedback that I get is that, they really are looking to try to gain a skill or something they don't have. And, you talked about like, what is the MBA? And, I know the MBA allowed me to see a lot of different things in different walks of life and be able to kind of present them to, do I want to do that? And then the things that you see from the people that we would meet in MBA, do I want to be like that? And so I, as you were saying that, I was thinking that's kind of a little bit of the mission of this podcast, and it kind of helped clarify that a little bit for me. So, Lisa, I'm so grateful for catching up with you again, and I'm just at awe of all of your accomplishments. It's just so awesome.
Oh, well, thank you, Troy. It's wonderful to talk to you. And And I do appreciate that and your kindness as well. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, I will let you go. And I just, again, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks again for joining me today on the Ameritocracy Show. Be sure to follow me on social media and our website at troyedgar.com, where you can get more information and sign up for my weekly email. I hope you have a great week.